It's time to accelerate. Hey friends, this is Andy. Welcome to episode 683 of Accelerate, the sales podcast of record. I've got a very interesting show lined up for you today. Joining me is my guest, Christine Comaford. Christine is a leadership and culture coach to high-performing executives and author of a very interesting book titled Power Your Tribe, Create Resilient Teams in Turbulent Times. Now, we're going to be talking about using science to sell. In particular, leveraging new insights into brain science to help you communicate more effectively, which obviously will help us all learn how to sell better. So before we get to Christine, I want to talk to you a little bit about the Sales House. It's my B2B sales learning accelerator, which just recently launched. I want to share with you what you'll find new this week in the Sales House. First, we're going to have a sales masterclass with Karen Dietz. Karen Dietz is a master storyteller, a PhD folklorist, works with companies all around the country, helping them learn how to tell their story. And she's going to be teaching us how to create a simple story that sells. We have a new course in our 9-Minute Sales Academy. It's titled How to Visualize Sales Success. Simple exercises you can use to help you succeed at each step of your selling process. We have our weekly live coaching and mentoring hour, and that's for the entire community. And we do that every week. I host those personally. And on Thursday, I'm hosting a live workshop with my guest, Lee Salz. And Lee's going to be sharing strategies from his new Amazon best-selling book, Sales Differentiation. So you'll make sure you want to join us for that. And as well as you get unlimited access to me and our entire community through our Sales House Facebook group. So, sales is hard work. And the good news is you don't have to sell alone. Come invest a few minutes a day in the Sales House to get just a little bit smarter, a little more proficient every single day. So visit thesaleshouse.com/accelerate. That is thesaleshouse.com/accelerate. I look forward to seeing you in the house. All right, let's jump into it with my guest today, Christine Comaford. Among the topics we're going to dive into are advances in brain science and how that helps us understand how to more effectively communicate. We're going to talk about how to establish rapport by using the experience of what Christine calls the same as. It's a really interesting concept to understand and one that you could put to use in your selling. We'll talk about issues of safety, belonging, and mattering and how they affect how you sell, how to mitigate the buyer's risk, and much, much more. So let's just jump right into it. Christine Comaford, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Andy. It's awesome to be here.
Oh, it's a pleasure to talk with you again. So where do we find you today? Joining us from?
San Francisco.
San Francisco. Okay. Remember the first time we spoke and we had not been introduced. I forgot how we got in touch. But we discovered that actually you had a high school connection with Bridget, who's my co-host on every show. I thought that was a small world story.
Very small world.
Now, did you guys were able to connect after that?
Yes, we were. Yeah, we were able to say hi over email. We'll see where that goes.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, she spent some of her time in San Francisco as well. So, all right. Well, we're going to jump right into it. And you've written a book called Power Your Tribes, Create Resilient Teams in Turbulent Times. And there you go. Show the book cover. That's perfect.
Woo!
And so you call yourself a neuroscience-based leadership and culture coach. So are you a neuroscientist?
No, I am not. I have a master's in applied neuroscience. So what we do is we take...
good enough for me.
Okay. It's putting it in the real world.
Sure.
It's applying it to business solutions instead of just doing a bunch of research with the brain. Yeah.
Okay. And so you've been doing this for a while.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, she says. So what was sort of the motivation for writing this book at this time?
Yes. So I know we've all noticed, and chime in on your experience, that the world is moving faster than ever. People are more stressed out than ever. They're bombarded with more information than ever. And people are having a hard time just being resilient, bouncing back, being emotionally agile, not getting stressed out and taken out. So I wrote Power Your Tribe to help people really create resilient teams, emotional agility in their workplace, with their prospects, with their clients, with their coworkers, etc. So it's full of really practical techniques that help us when we're having a bad day, when we're feeling stressed out, when we're not quite connecting with somebody and looking for tools to help.
Okay. And based on research and some familiar names in your book in some cases, but some that obviously aren't so familiar with people. But there has been this revolution really since World War II, I think, in terms of understanding the brain and how we make decisions, how we process information.
Yes, totally. And if we use that in sales and marketing contexts, in leadership contexts, we can communicate with the most primal part of the brain, the creature neurology, the reptilian and mammalian brain. And that's where most of our conflicts, misunderstandings, disconnections occur anyway. It takes a little bit more work for us to learn the tools we're going to talk about today so we can step onto somebody's map of the world and really give them an experience of same as. You're the same as me, so I don't need to resist you. So that's what we're going to talk about today in terms of tools.
Yeah, I mean, sort of a hyper empathy.
Yeah, a hyper empathy in a really practical way. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm just getting things out of the way first. So at the beginning of your book, how'd you snag that testimonial from Bill Gates?
Oh, that's a testimonial from a really long time ago.
Oh, okay. All right.
When I was working with him.
So were you coaching Bill individually?
I worked with Bill for 16 years.
Really?
At Microsoft, and we worked together one-on-one. And I was one of the, seriously, Andy, I'm sure there were a gajillion people, but I was one of the gajillion people that spent time with Bill saying, it's okay to leave Microsoft and pursue philanthropy. Let it go. You've done it. Move forward to your dream. So I think that's one of my key accomplishments in this lifetime. Although I know there were a gajillion other people saying the same thing.
Well, yeah. So let me dig further into the title of the book then. Is when you talk about creating resilient teams in turbulent times. Yeah, but the turbulence is not just things you talked about. I wonder sometimes in your work, are you seeing the impact of sort of the increased tribalism that we see in the political sphere?
Yep.
Are those, tribal, is that tribalism being transferred into the workplace? I mean, our workplace is becoming less safe in that regard in terms of suddenly it matters. Oh no, I'm sitting next to a Trump supporter, or likewise, I'm sitting next to a liberal. Is that creating turbulence in the workplace?
Well, some of it. But if we step back and we say, where does that turbulence come from? It comes from people that are asking for an emotional experience and not getting it. Without naming names, there are certain world leaders who maybe are craving mattering. And so they need to stir things up to get a lot of attention. And then other people will be not feeling safe by that. So it all comes down below it all to somebody either craving and getting or not getting. And if they don't get it, then their behavior gets a little wacky. Safety, belonging, and mattering. And then we start to break into these subdivisions of I agree with this, I don't agree with that. And that further divides us. Instead of keeping us together as human beings, we start to faction off and we don't belong with each other. So safety, belonging, mattering is awesome because it's below all of this. And if we can find that common core, okay, somebody likes this political person, somebody likes that one. But if we can find that common core of humanity and what we all are aspiring to, it makes a huge difference, especially in sales, marketing, and leadership scenarios.
Well, I just wondered though too, really the question is the impact of that external tribalism finding its way into the workplace is that it changes the tenor of discourse because now with this whole BS about fake news and so on, which is obviously a way to stake a position, but occasionally I hear people not respecting other people's opinions now because they fall into those that easy disrespectful, position. It's like, yeah, that's fake, right? We're not giving judgmental, not giving credence to people, even at a basic level. So I was wondering how much you're seeing that through your work, because I'm seeing glimmers of it, and it's concerning.
Yes, and the more sensationalism is out there, the more people are stressed to take a stand. So I think it kind of starts out there with key leaders not being responsible and trying to manipulate people emotionally. Then we all as individuals need to say, okay, I'm getting really stressed out by whatever's happening out there. What do I believe and how do I want to show up? And am I going to be a professional that lets people have their own points of view and just looks at what's the business goal here? So I see it a little bit. But we find that if we can use these tools to keep people focused on the business goal and not the personal judgments, we move forward faster.
Okay. Well, I mean, you talk about this idea of the safety, belonging, mattering really in the context of, I'll say, a journey, right? From where you are today, what you call your present state, versus where you want to be, your desired state. And so how do these things help you get from where you are today to where you want to be?
Yes. So as we start to look at what somebody is actually asking us for, so if somebody is spreading fear and they're spreading gossip and rumors and they're talking about, jumping ship, chances are really good they're craving safety. So they're trying to take safety away from others because they're not feeling safe inside. So they want everybody else to not feel safe. That way they're not nuts.
Interesting. Okay. All right.
Yeah. It's called identity coherence. I want to see that consistency so I know I'm not nuts. It's making my internal world be the same as my external world.
So if you have a boss who's, and we've all worked for him. I've worked for two people in my career I thought were literally nuts. What you're saying is, they were creating that chaotic environment because they needed it to say, okay, it's not me, it's the world, right?
Yeah. Yep. And what we can do is sit down with them in the safety case and say, hey, let's talk about what your concerns are. Let's create a plan and a backup plan and a backup plan to the backup plan. What data do you need? What information do you need so that that things are in order? The belonging stuff gets a little bit messy because a lot of us will, if we think about our workplace, we can imagine scenarios or remember scenarios where somebody withheld information, where they dropped out of communication, where they formed silos. And that's a person who is in what we call critter state, that fight, flight, freeze state. And they are not feeling that they belong. So they are showing that in the external world. See, I don't belong. Why should I communicate with others? So if somebody is dropping out of communication, is not following through, is stepping away, we need to actually say, wow, I'm so glad you're part of the team. What can we create together? What initiatives can we put in place together? I see all your contributions.
Stressing community at that point.
Thank you. Yes. Bringing them back into the fold, bringing them back into the tribe because they've gone rogue, And then third, mattering. If we see, and again, think about this in sales scenarios too. Safety, right? Belonging, if the person stops communicating, if they keep needing more information. Mattering. If somebody's in their critter state, their fight, flight, freeze state, we call it critter because it's more fun. It's like a little animal, safe or not, dead or not. And if they aren't experiencing mattering, then they will have the behavior of condescension, arrogance, telling everybody that, they're doing everything. It's all on them, being overly self-focused. And that creates less of an experience of mattering. So they're just basically taking their internal world and creating the external world to match it. So what we can do there is, wow, I really see you as a thought leader. I'd really like to hear your opinion on this. Wow, these great contributions you made really made a difference, et cetera.
But some of that mattering, though, and you're talking about sort of external validation in terms of creating a sense of esteem in someone. But really, when we talk about self-esteem, I mean, it's both external and internal.
Thank you. Yes. And that's a meta program. Yeah. Whether somebody needs external proof to know that they are good enough and matter, or if it's a feeling, if it's you know what, I did my absolute best. So even if it didn't work out, I'm okay because I did my best. That's my gauge of was I good enough? So that's a meta program that we'll talk about in a couple minutes as well.
Well, so you summarize saying that safety, belonging, mattering, an equation, 1 + 1 + 1 + 2 + 3 = trust.
Yes.
So let's look at this from a sales context. We've talked about these 3 criteria, which are, for people familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, these are basically sort of the 3 middle stripes of the five stripes that are in the pyramid. in ascending order: safety, belonging, and esteem. You're saying that safety is important, obviously, for buyers because the biggest impediment to any decision making is the perception of risk.
Absolutely, yeah. So if we have,
how do you mitigate that?
Yes. So if you have a buyer who is giving you all sorts of messages about not feeling safe, fear, all the different problems that could occur, all the bad stuff that could happen, what's the backup plan? What if the system fails? Then that's when we talk about guarantees. We talk about service level agreements. We talk about how we have their back. We show them a bunch of testimonials of people who had those same concerns. We talk about gnarly, challenging scenarios that we've gone into, and we've actually made things right, taken chaos and created order. We need to show them that we value that experience of seeking safety, and we have worked with people just like them.
Yeah, I think that in a sales context, this idea of making sure your buyer feels safe is, as you said, a risk, and you can sort of sense it in the quote unquote objections you get, the questions you get that deal more with, as you talked about, sort of the what if type scenarios. And you give certainly a lot of examples about how that could be mitigated, the risk could be mitigated, but you have to think about it as, if the buyer's feeling at risk, then that's going to hold up the decision more than anything else, really. Absolutely.
Yeah. And what's interesting is belonging comes up a lot in technology sales when you are talking to the technology buyer. Many of us have had the experience where we have maybe 3 to 5 to 6 different decision makers or influencers. Mm-hmm. We need to code. Okay, the operations guy needs to feel safety. The technology gal needs to have the experience of belonging. We're as techie as she is. We get how complex this is. We value the systems integration issues. Maybe the executive sponsor is craving mattering. So we actually need to blend our messages if everyone's in the same meeting room to talk about the safety aspects, the belonging aspects. Wow, we've been in the trenches with so many clients, just like what you guys are going through, and we understand the complexities and the mattering. Yeah.
Well, the example you gave, that seems more like the safety aspect. So it's really how do you make somebody feel the sense of community around the product you're buying, other than just the product they're buying, other than having an actual community, but in the selling process, how do you really inculcate that feeling of belonging?
Yeah, we talk with them about what it's like to be a technology person and what the key aspects and complexities are of technology, and we help them understand that we've been there, we're like them. We understand that tech perspective. We're not just a suit selling stuff. So this is where systems engineers are so great. When we bring SEs in on sales situations, right? You pop the SE right down to the tech person. They're like, oh, you're a techie, I'm a techie. Let's just communicate tech because the suits don't understand what we're talking about. Mm-hmm. So, we want them to have that same as experience at a belonging level of, hey, we're in this together. I get what the tech is and how it works. Here's something that actually a lot of our clients come across when they're doing integration. Oh, I hadn't thought of that. Hey, do you think we should actually also consider these 3 features because it looks like the scalability is possibly going to hit this particular level? That's interesting. How fast do the scalability issues kick in? And we get down in there with them.
Yeah, and when you're using this term same as, what I think to be helpful for people to sort of think about it is that this is why I sort of talk about the extreme empathy is that what you're saying is, we're the same as you are.
Exactly. So we're the same as you are, whether they crave safety, belonging, or mattering.
Right. So whatever your concern is, we get it because we are you. You are us.
Yes. And we can do that in a bunch of different ways. We can do that with looking at their speech patterns, their behaviors, and noticing what they're actually asking for from us, safety, belonging, or mattering. And then we can also do it by speaking their actual language, which is meta programs.
Right. Well, we'll get to that in just a second. I think that's, I think for people to really grasp this for sales is this idea of, like I said, sort of extreme empathy. Is that you hear a lot of talk about objections and how you manage those, how you handle those, and so on. But really, the key, I believe, the key to handling I mean, how do I call it handling objections? Because I hate that terminology, is that objections are really a question. It's just a question that needs to be answered. And so it depends. Is it a safety question? Is it a belonging question? Do you really understand what I'm going through in this particular sense? Or is it a mattering question, meaning, how important am I to you or to this whole process?
Yeah. And will I look good? It's back to that phrase from a long time ago, no one gets fired for buying IBM.
Which is really the safety thing, right?
It's safety and some mattering. Yeah. Will I get status? That's mattering is kind of, will I get status? Will I look good? Will this project be a success? And that will then propel my career.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And those are very intertwined. So, all right, let's jump in and talk about the time we have left with these meta programs you talk about. I mean, when I was reading about those in your book is sort of called to mind sort of the Jungian archetypes, I guess, in the sense that I think he defined 7 archetypes, and that everybody sits on a spectrum. Mm-hmm. And I think similar to what you're talking about with your meta programs is you call out 6 in particular, that everybody's personality, who they are, their emotional agility, whatever attribute we want to attribute to them is a combination of all 6.
Mm-hmm. And one last thing on safety, belonging, mattering, because it applies to meta programs.
Sure.
Safety, belonging, mattering is contextual. So when you're with your financial person, your financial advisor, maybe you crave safety. When you're with your friends, maybe you crave belonging, right? When you're with your significant other, maybe you crave most in that emotional experience, mattering. So I want us to look at how safety, belonging, mattering is on a range, and it's also contextual. Meta programs are the filters through which we experience the world. Meta programs really help you understand a person's map of the world, what it's really like to be them. And when we speak to someone using their meta programs, they not only really hear what we're saying, they have an even deeper experience of same as, because we're actually speaking their language. And it's really my favorite version of rapport. It does take some work, but I find it's totally worth it. When you understand somebody's meta programs, you actually understand the structure of their identity and their belief system. It's really powerful stuff.
So give us an example.
Yeah. Okay. So here's one. Toward, away. A person is either toward, get, attain, achieve, goals, or away. Mitigate risk, solve problems, prevent disaster.
Mm-hmm.
So if we speak to the away person, mitigate risk, solve problems, prevent disaster, and we're talking about, let's take this risk and we'll do all that cool stuff and achieve these goals, they're not going to have the same as experience. If we talk to a toward person, goals, all good stuff, get pleasure, yay. And they don't even think about pain. The way people think about pain, the toward think of pleasure. And we start talking about, well, what about this risk? Well, what about that could go wrong? They're going to be like, why are you bumping my high? You're not the same as me. You're clearly not a visionary, So that's an example of one. Shall I go through each of the 6? Would that be helpful?
Well, let's talk about that one for a second, because I think that I was thinking that in the context when I was reading that I just read Daniel Burris's book, The Anticipatory Organization, and he talks about this concept, which I think is a very valid concept, but I think overlays with what you talk about with the toward away meta program, the direction meta program, is that people inhabit different slices of time, is the metaphor he uses. So that when you look at people, you're maybe talking to somebody about making an investment in a technology product, is that someone's perspective from a risk standpoint, they're not in the same time space that you are. I mean, you could be 5 years forward. You accept the risk. This technology. This is no brainer for you. For them, it's still something that there's more risk associated with it, the risk both personal and organizationally. So that toward away, to me, sort of maps to that, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep. If they're solving problems, mitigating risk, preventing disaster, you have to speak in that language. And
I like the context that Burris talked about in, because I think a lot of times that is, especially since we do have some segment of the audience here that's in the tech business is that when you're looking at people from instead of saying, gosh, they're an early adapter or an innovator or whatever, is look at it from this time idea, is that people just are inhabit different slices of time. If you're not aligned with the person, the decision maker, on a time perspective, then it's just not going to happen until you are.
Yeah.
All right. So let's go to another one.
Options procedures. So options people, lots of choice, lots of possibility. The world is my buffet or oyster. Lots of bright, shiny objects. I want to play with them all. Procedures, fewer choices, proven step-by-step process. And if you ask an options person, like, why'd you pick your car? They'll give you a list of criteria: black, fast, good mileage. If you ask a procedures person, you'll actually hear the process they went through. I wasn't happy with my car. I then test drove this. I then checked it out online. I then talked to my mechanic. Then I bought the car. The procedures person is compelled, important word, to finish the process. So if we have a procedures person, which we see a lot in operations, we see a lot in technology, we see a lot in finance, we see a lot in procurement, you're going to want to spell things out for them so that they feel compelled to go through the whole process. So super important there.
Yeah, well, I think that's sort of similar to what Herbert Simon talked about, or in terms of maximizers in decision making, is the people that have to, on one extreme, have to look at every single alternative to convince themselves they're making the absolute right choice, or best choice. And the science backs up the fact they do make the best choice, but you have to decide whether that's somebody you really want to invest your time selling to, or people on the other end of the spectrum that gather just enough information to make the good decision.
And that's similar to the general specific meta program. And I want to stress that when we're talking to a room full of people, just like with safety, belonging, mattering, we can blend. So if you have a room and you've got some people that are toward and some people that are away, some people that are options, some people that are procedures, you blend. So we have lots of challenges. The away people are going to pop up, and we have some really great opportunities. The toward people are saying, yay! We have lots of choice and possibility. Options people, woo! And we're going to follow a proven step-by-step process. Okay, we can blend because the human brain deletes, distorts, and generalizes. So the away person is going to delete the toward messages if we blend them all.
Yeah, people. Yeah, it's like averaging, right? We take out the extremes and average the middle ones. Yes.
The stuff that doesn't interest us, we move on. And general specific is super simple as a meta program. Does a person process big chunks of information, or do they like to start down the details and then see the big picture? We all know somebody who suffers, actually. I have a client here. If I go into too much detail, he goes, oh, ow, stop. That's an extreme general person. We need to know.
But you can't always avoid it, though.
You can't always avoid it, but like if we're doing a company brochure, or there's a complex selling message, what you can do that's great is have really good descriptive headlines, and the general people are only going to read the headlines, and the specific people will read the pages and pages that follow.
So how are clients of yours, or anybody that you're familiar with, that you work with, how are they using this, these meta programs to actually then identify who they want to hire? And how are they using it for the recruiting and interviewing process?
Good. Thank you. Great question. So for starters, it's really helpful to, especially for salespeople. If we think about salespeople, someone who's going to be out there, feet on the street, what meta programs would be most helpful for the salesperson? In many situations, it depends what they're selling. In many situations, it's probably toward, right? Get, attain, achieve, goals. I want to reach my quota, etc. It's probably going to be procedures. I'm going to follow the sales process so that I can make sure that I complete it. General specific, it depends on the product. When we have a series of questions to ask in Power Your Tribe to help you uncover the meta programs of a given person. First, it's really helpful to say, what would the ideal meta program profile be, and safety, belonging, mattering trigger, be for this particular role? If it's an executive assistant, wow, they better be really specific, because there's a lot of specificity and there are a lot of procedures and probably also a way in an executive assistant position. So first we sketch out what the profile should be, and then we go through Power Your Tribe and we look at the different questions. We ask those to see if the person is going to match.
Yeah, I mean, I think that becomes a real interesting challenge, right? I mean, because it's a lot to sort of think about. That's hard for people to keep in mind when they're doing interviewing, because it's hard enough to get managers to not fall in love with the first candidate they see. Lots of sort of suboptimal behaviors that go on. So, I was wondering, how does an organization really learn this if they want to implement it, and keep it operational? Operationalize it in such a way that they actually use it from a day-to-day basis.
What I find happens in the vast majority of companies we work with, first, they use it in sales and marketing, and they find their salespeople are closing their sales up to 50% faster. Their marketing messages are up 300% or greater, more effective. They first use it in sales and marketing, and it brings in more money. Then they bother to use it in other areas. But seriously, I'm trying to think of one example where the client first started using it in recruiting. They do use it later, though, once they see how much it works in sales and marketing. I would love to say that we could change that, but when people are closing faster and they're harvesting more of their pipeline, then it gets everybody's attention.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that's really anything that helps people. I mean, part of the reason I enjoy reading the book is I'm fascinated about this idea of how do we connect with other people. The whole relationship aspect of sales, the human element of sales. You and I have spoken about this before, and we don't spend enough time on this. We don't educate people enough about it, but it is hard, right? Because there's all these sort of day-to-day things that start interfering, and companies have their own processes, and they start layering things upon things, and it gets harder for people to sort of keep in mind. So building habits out of that. I think the fact you reduced it from 52 meta programs to 6 was a great start. Yeah, helps people.
And you can even use like 2 or 3. If a person is like super toward, just focus on super toward, and maybe he craves mattering. Just do like 1 safety, belonging, mattering trigger and 1 meta program, and you'll start to notice the rapport growing. Then you can pop in some extra ones. Let's make it easy enough so people actually do it.
Yeah, well, I think the safety, belonging, and mattering is something that people could all understand pretty quickly, and because if you're not cognizant of risk when you're selling, then you're missing one of the most fundamental deterrents to a decision being made. If you wonder why 50 to 80% of your pipeline's not making a decision, or making the decision to not make a decision, they make the affirmative decision to make no decision. Risk is going to be a big part of that.
Yeah. And none of us buy products or services. We buy emotional experiences. No?
Well, fundamentally, life in general is driven by emotion, right? So it's
absolutely.
Theoretically, I think there is no such thing as a rational decision. There's all emotional decisions. So it's just to what degree the emotions decided.
Yeah. And if you look at research from Carnegie Mellon, NYU, Stanford, Harvard, UCLA, etc., Columbia, we've learned now that 90%, 90 to 92, depends on whose research, but that's good enough, of our decisions are dominated by our emotional brain. So why don't we take our 10%, our intellect, and really learn about that emotional brain? And again, we don't have to do all of it. We can just use, 1 or 2 meta programs and start to deeply connect with that human being, and don't see them as a persona, see them as a person, That's one of your phrases, which I think is awesome.
Yes.
Love that. And now we can actually communicate, and even if they're not ready, the timing is not right, we have this bond. They're going to refer you to somebody at some point. It's all going to work out at some point.
Right. And unfortunately, we've run out of time, but we'll have you back. We can talk further. I think the challenge of the age is for certain segments in sales in particular that are more progressive in their use of technology. I shouldn't necessarily say progressive, but more advanced in their use of technology in the sales space, is how are they balancing the technology with the human side of things? And right now, it's not going very well, my opinion, not going very well. And it doesn't mean it's not going to, and I think it absolutely could, because, gosh, we need to take advantage of this if it serves the interests of the customers as well as our interests. Right now, it's just the technology is all in service of the seller. And that's one of the issues. But anyway, we'll have to come back and talk about that again, because I think that's really, a critical issue is how do we then take this next step and say, okay, how do we integrate these with the tools that are here or that are coming?
Yeah, good. And let's also next time actually step through some examples, before and afters. Yeah, that might be fun.
All right. Yeah. Well, Christine, thank you very much. It's been great to have you here. So tell people how they can connect with you.
Yes. Smart Tribes Institute is our website, Smart Tribes Institute. You can go there and get all of our goodies, and then
Don't forget that book.
It's our latest book, and you will love Chapter 2 and Chapter 7 will change the way that you sell. If you can't read the whole book, just read Chapter 2 and 7.
Yeah, I think people should read. Your introduction is quite good, and Chapter 1 is, if you're going to understand the concepts, you need to read just more than 2 and 7. But
okay,
you guys can read the whole thing. I know you can read the whole thing. I trust that you can.
And it's on audiobook, and it's going to help you close 50% faster. Fine, read the whole thing.
All right, Christine. Thank you very much. We'll talk to you soon. Okay, friends, that was Accelerate for the week. First of all, I want to thank you for joining me, and I want to thank my guest, Christine Comaford. Join me again next week as I welcome Brian Margolis to Accelerate. Brian is the author of the book titled The Index Card Business Plan for Sales Pros and Entrepreneurs. I actually featured this book a couple months ago in my Friday book club writing. So we're going to dive into that. We'll be talking about business planning for salespeople. It's an interesting book, and I think you'll want to pick it up and read it after you hear that conversation. Before you go, don't forget to check out The Sales House, the only all-in-one sales learning accelerator for B2B sellers. Visit thesaleshouse.com/accelerate. All right, thanks again for joining me. Until next week, I'm your host, Andy Paul. Good selling, everyone.